Hey guys, today we dig our wooden spoons into the most depressing bowl in culinary history, gruel. This is not your grandma's oatmeal or a quaint British porridge. No cinnamon, no raisins, no splash of almond milk. Just a lifeless slurry of water and boiled grains that somehow passed for food. You probably won't survive this. And honestly, you won't want to. Gruel was not served when people were hungry. It was served when people had nothing. Not enough to stew, not enough to bake, not even enough for decent pottage. Just this. Liquid sadness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You wake before dawn, lips dry, belly cramping. Not from last night's feast. There was not one, but from another restless night of hunger. The fire's embers are out. The larder, empty, except for a fist-sized bag of oats you have hidden like treasure. You weigh your options, cook it all now and feel full for an hour. Or stretch it thin across 2 or 3 meals. You choose the second. You always do. A cracked pot goes on the hearth. You pour in water drawn yesterday, faintly cloudy. And let it heat. Then, cautiously, you add your oats. Not too much. Stir. Stir again. You pray for thickness, but it resists. The mixture stays pale, watery, almost translucent. A few rogue bubbles surface. You tell yourself this counts as breakfast. This is gruel. You ladle out a thin scoop into a dented wooden bowl. There is no fat to coat it, no salt to brighten it, just grain and water and the steam of resignation. You sip it, not chew. It runs down your throat like warmth and regret. It does not fill you, but it buys time. Historians agree that gruel was never a first-choice dish. It was a fallback plan. A culinary white flag. Some scholars argue it was the logical end result of medieval frugality, a way to consume the smallest caloric yield over the longest stretch of time. Others debate whether it was rooted in medical theories, designed to balance the humors by delivering food in its most digestible, least stimulating form. You are pretty sure no one eating this cared about humors. But for all its weakness, gruel had strength, at least in purpose. It kept you alive when nothing else could. You could make it from almost anything, barley, rye, millet, even ground acorns in the worst of times. The water was doing most of the work, but your body did not complain. Not loudly, anyway. There is a moment, about halfway through the bowl, where your stomach settles just enough to let you think. You glance outside. Someone scraping frost from their thatch. Another neighbor is breaking ice at the well. All of you ate the same thing. All of you still feel hollow. You finish the bowl. It is not satisfying. But you are no longer shaking. The hunger has not vanished. It has just been hushed. For now. You rinse the bowl with the same water you will use for the next batch, because wasting it would be unthinkable. One ragged corner of bread might help thicken tomorrow's pot. Assuming it does not mold first. But for now, you have done all you can. You set the pot aside and head out. There is no energy for chores, but you do them anyway. That is the thing about gruel, it is not fuel so much as a delay button on collapse. You feed the chickens with cracked fingers, tug frozen weeds from the garden, and scavenge behind the storage shed for anything edible. Dandelion roots. Maybe a stray onion. You are not optimistic. Still, you remember worse times. The Great Famine of 1315 haunts your village like a ghost with muddy boots. Everyone has a story. Someone's uncle who boiled shoe leather. A cousin who tried eating moss. You once met a woman who swore she saw a man cook his belt and drink the broth. Gruel was a luxury back then. What you are eating now, that is advanced cuisine, by famine standards. It does not scream. It does not stink. And it does not run away. You return home, kneel by the hearth, and blow the fire back to life. The pot groans as it heats. You add a splash of water and a few oats from the corner of the sack. The gruel simmers, watery and gray. You notice a slight green tinge. Maybe the oats caught a bit of mildew. Doesn't matter. It is boiling now. That is close enough to clean. You stir slowly, watching the ripples like omens. In medieval hospitals, gruel was medicine. Given to the sick, the elderly, the newborn, anyone too weak to chew or digest solid food. Recipes even appear in surviving texts from monastic infirmaries, usually calling for oat or barley gruel boiled with milk or wine, if either were available. For most peasants, they were not. Milk was for calves. Wine was for church. But monks believed gruel had healing properties, if not nutritional then at least spiritual. Some versions were steeped with herbs, chamomile for sleep, horehound for lungs, mugwort for dreams. You have never had any of those. Just oats and water. If there is healing in that, it must be very shy. You dip your spoon again. The flavor does not change, it never does. But sometimes, you pretend it does. You tell your children it tastes like stew if they close their eyes. They do not believe you. But they smile anyway. Historians still argue whether gruel was intentionally kept bland to teach humility or if it was just the inevitable result of poverty. Some believe its monotony served a moral function, reminding people of their place, stripping food down to its barest form. Others suggest it was simply what happened when resources ran out and innovation gave way to desperation. You are not interested in theories. You are interested in not feeling your ribs so much. When you move, the gruel bubbles. You taste it. Still thin. Still lifeless. Still yours. The gruel slides down your throat with the urgency of a sigh. It does not fill you. It delays the hunger just enough for you to function, barely. But that is enough. Because the sun is still up, and your work is not done. You wrap the pot in rags and sling it into a wicker basket. It is your only travel ration, and it is better lukewarm than not at all. Today you are heading to the abbey fields to help with threshing, swinging flails over bundles of grain like your life depends on it. Because, quite literally, it does. You eat your gruel seated on a sack of straw, watching your breath fog in the cold morning air. The others do the same, slurping from wooden cups or hollowed gourds. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. This is the food of silence. Of survival. Gruel was never meant to be celebrated. It does not star in feast day menus or inspire ballads, but it kept you upright when everything else failed. In times of siege, when walls closed in and stores ran low, people turned to gruel. Thin barley broth was poured from communal pots and doled out like liquid gold. In one French account from the 100 Years' War, a besieged town survived weeks longer than expected on nothing but oat gruel mixed with the dust of dried peas. Whether it was nutritious or not, it bought them time to wait for rescue or surrender. Gruel has always been the pause between crisis and collapse. You dip your spoon again, chewing more from instinct than necessity. The texture changes slightly, some grains have begun to soften and break apart. That is the closest gruel ever gets to cooking. It is also when the pot gets dangerously low. And here's where things get philosophical, because when you get to the bottom of a gruel pot, you are not scraping for food. You are scraping for control. For continuity. The act of eating becomes ritual. Stir, scoop, swallow. It mimics order in a world where none exists. Back at the hearth, you remember your father stirring the same pot. His voice muttering about debts and seasons and the old ways. He said gruel was humble. Said it kept pride in check. You never understood that, until the year the rye spoiled, and all you had left was a handful of grain and a lot of rainwater. You add a pinch of ash to the pot now. Not for taste, but because someone once told you it helps digestion. Maybe it is superstition. Maybe it is folk science. Historians still debate the accuracy of medieval medical theory, particularly the belief in humors and the idea that food could correct emotional imbalances. Gruel was often labeled cold and moist, a supposed balm for anger, but bad for melancholy. You have no idea what your mood is. But you are sure this meal won't change it. Still, you eat. Because this is not about pleasure. It is about habit. Habit with a heartbeat. You scrape the bottom, find one more mouthful, and swallow. A whisper of grain. A ghost of strength. And it will have to do. Your arms ache from swinging the flail, and your legs burn from crouching in the mud, but there is no stopping yet. The sun has barely crested noon, and the smell of churned earth and damp wool clings to everything. Your stomach grumbles, not because you are starving, though you probably are, but because it knows the routine. This is gruel of the clock. You find a corner near the tool shed, away from the worst of the wind, and retrieve your pot. It is gone lukewarm. A grayish film has formed on top. You stir it gently with your fingers. There is no shame. Everyone does it. The gruel thickens slightly. Barely enough to resist the spoon. That is a luxury. In lean times, especially during the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, gruel was all that stood between life and death. Not bread. Not meat. Just boiled grain and hope. Monastic chronicles mention entire villages reduced to porridge and boiled herbs, flavored with salt if fortune permitted. And fortune rarely did. There is one account, half myth, half cautionary tale, about a baker in Bruges who fed gruel to the town's orphans during a siege. He stirred the pot each morning with a prayer and refused to eat until every child had their share. People say he died of hunger but died smiling. It is hard to verify. But the image sticks. Gruel carries that kind of mythology, not because it was beloved, but because it endured. Like an old song hummed in an empty room. You sit on a barrel and take another bite. The wind howls across the fields. A sparrow lands near your foot, bold and hungry, watching you eat with one beady eye. You consider tossing it a drop. Then think better of it. The bird can wait. You can't. In medieval hospitals, gruel was prescribed as both food and medicine. Thin oat gruel for fever. Rice gruel, when available, for stomach ailments. Barley gruel, if the patient is too weak for solid food, according to one 12th century medical manual. But there is debate, as always. Some scholars argue that the line between nourishment and palliative care was paper thin. Was the gruel meant to heal, or just to soften the blow? Still, it was something. It is always something. You look at your hands, chapped, stained, older than their years, and remember the first time you cooked gruel alone. A hearth too hot, oats too scarce, and a spoon too small. You burned it. Ate it anyway. Smiled because the smoke covered the taste. The pot beside you lets out a soft hiss as it cools in the wind. You place the cloth back over it with something that feels like reverence. This is not gourmet. It is barely food. But it is yours. And there is dignity in that. Your neighbor walks past, nods once, and pulls a spoon from her apron. She does not ask. She just dips it in and slurps. Eyes closed, the same way you do. Communal food. Communal fatigue. No one owns a pot of gruel outright. It belongs to the moment, to whoever needs it most. The field calls again. The tools wait. You rise, bones creaking, and leave the pot behind the barrel. It will be there later. Still warm. Still enough. By dusk, your body is a sack of aches. The wind is colder now, and the smoke from your neighbor's fire drifts low and sour across the path. Inside your home, if you can call it that, the hearth glows faintly. Not much firewood left. Not much of anything. You uncover the pot. The gruel has changed again, thicker now, more paste than broth. You add a splash of water. Stir with a carved spoon, and watch as yesterday melts into today. That is the thing about gruel, it does not mark time. It absorbs it. You ladle some into a bowl. Your child is already there, eyes wide and silent. You pass it over. No words. Just gratitude. There is a story in the village of a noble who, during a harsh winter, disguised himself and lived among the poor for a week. He lasted 3 days before returning home, declaring the taste of gruel fit only for beasts. His tenants never forgot that, nor forgave it. And yet, records show that even royals had gruel on fast days. It was called something else, of course, flavored broth or tempered grain infusion. But the ingredients were nearly identical. Barley, oats, water. Sometimes honey or almond milk if you were lucky. But at its core, still gruel. Historians still argue whether gruel's universality made it equalizing or humiliating. Did it flatten class lines, or reinforce them? Was it proof of shared survival, or just another badge of suffering handed down generation to generation? The answer, perhaps, is yes. To all of it. You take another bite. It is bland. But it does not offend. Gruel rarely does. It is too tired for drama. Too honest for disguise. Somewhere down the road, someone begins to sing. A slow tune, low and rhythmic, like stirring. You hum along, without realizing. The child beside you sways. It is not joy, exactly, but it is close. Familiarity, perhaps. A sense that even if the stew never improves, the act of eating it together, of surviving it together, matters. You remember old Berna, who used to say that gruel was not food, it was silence. Because nobody wanted to talk while chewing it. And because what could you say about boiled grain that had not already been said? But silence can be sacred. So you eat quietly. One spoon at a time. Each bite a pause. A breath. A small, defiant still here. And when the bowl is empty, you scrape the last bits with your finger. You wipe it clean with a crust of bread so stale it thuds when dropped. Then you cover the pot again, careful, almost tender. It has earned the respect. Because tomorrow, it will hold more than oats and water. It will hold routine, memory, continuity. You bank the coals, tuck in the child, sit by the hearth, and for a moment, there is peace. So tonight, as you settle near the fire and listen to the wind tapping gently at the shutters, take comfort in the quiet churn of the old pot. It does not sing. It does not shine. But it waits. And in that waiting, in that slow, forgiving rhythm of boiling and cooling and boiling again, lies the soft heartbeat of resilience. A warm bowl. A full breath. A shared glance across the table. These are the small things that hold you here, that carry you forward. And as long as there is a spoonful left, there is hope. Thanks for watching.